Yo, what's up with the people? Good evening. It seems like every day that I do these interviews, there's something new in reference to what it is that we are endeavoring to do. You know, basically the legislation that brought both of us home and the previous guys that I've done these interviews with is being threatened. The threat is imminent. The threat is real. I told y'all I was going to try to get 100 stories. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that many in time, but I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to try to expedite these things a little bit faster so that we can get as many as we possibly can. So when we get a line on one of them Republican senators, one of them Republican congressmen, you know what I mean, we'll have our stories to share, get them to see and bear witness to a lot of the great things, man, that the brothers have been doing post-incarceration. Today I got my brother with me, my comrade, Momolu Stewart. We're going to go in with him. He's the third interview within, I guess, probably the past 8-9 days. We're going to keep it going. We're going to get the momentum going until it gains as much traction as we need to be able to put eyes and ears on these stories, man, so that people can really advocate for the particular legislation that we came home on, and so that others that's dependent and have developed hope with the possibility of having a second chance at life will be able to still have that chance. So that's the struggle. That's what we're endeavoring to do. And so we're going to get right into it. My brother Momolu, I want you to tell the people a little bit about yourself. You know, they know you already. You know, you're famous. But you my brother. You know, I know a little bit more than all them. I want you to get them just what life was like for you growing up, a little bit, you know, during the time before you was incarcerated. And we all know that during this particular period of time, we grew up in the era where DC was the murder capital. It was the height of the crack era. You know, it was what it was. A lot of that stuff led to us ultimately going to prison because we couldn't extricate ourselves from those environments. But I want you to tell the people a little bit about you, your struggles, and what life was like prior to you being confined.
How y'all doing, man? My name Momolu. Initially, my imprisonment started when I was 16 years old. Before being incarcerated, I actually, I lost my dad when I was really young. I was 6 years old. He was murdered, and I lost my mom to imprisonment. You know, she went to jail when I was 6 years old as well, and she came home when I was 15, about to turn 16, and she, got an apartment, and I started living with her for about a year before I was incarcerated. Before she came home, most of I say from 14 to 15, I had to deal with homelessness, live with my comrades and friends. And that was pretty much, a lot of the stuff that I was going through.
Okay. Now, you say you were incarcerated at 16 under Title 16, right?
Yes.
And ultimately, you was convicted of some crimes.
Yes.
And ultimately, how much time did you receive for those particular crimes?
So I received, I want to say, all together for all of the crimes, because they ran them consecutively. It was 75 years, and I had the life sentence because you automatically get the life sentence when you convicted of a murder. So with the two assault cases that I had and the murder, it all ran together and consecutively. So it was 75 to life.
So as a young man going through that process and getting sentenced to all that time, what kind of impact did that have on you? How did you feel? And I'm not asking you that. I don't want to diminish nothing that may have happened to victims or anything like that. And if you want to just speak on how you feel about that, you can. But I want to know ultimately, just being in a situation like that as a young person, how did you feel?
So back then, I really wasn't cognizant, as I am now. So a lot of things that was going on in regards, because I didn't even understand life, so I didn't really have a full awareness of, that about life. I didn't really understand it, so when I was really young, I just felt like it was just part of life, because everything that I was going through at that time was always bad. I had to see my dad lose his life, seeing them on the ground, you know what I'm saying, seeing them on the floor, bleeding, blood pouring out of them, you know what I mean, passing out at 6 years old, seeing my mother be cuffed, detectives questioning me about the murder while I'm 6 years old, all of those things kind of like prepared me for a life that, I was going to have to go through later on, where I had to, just basically get through.
So it's interesting that you say that, right? And I definitely appreciate you sharing some of the intimate details, of your history and your story. But you mentioned when I asked you about how did you feel when you got sentenced and stuff like that, and it was like you couldn't even really wrap your mind around it. It was like you just felt that was just a natural progression in how life should be as a child. But now I want to ask you this, and that was premised upon the trauma that you had already been through. But at some point throughout your incarceration, you began to make a shift. So I want you to talk about that shift, what caused that shift, and then after you made that shift and became more conscious about certain things like the value of life, your life, the life of others, what life means, developing that particular understanding. Once you made that change, how did you feel about your incarceration at that point?
So even when I was on the juvenile block, or, when I was on the juvenile block, I would always, have a way of calling on the Creator, right? Not even really understanding fully who and what the Creator is.
Right.
Not even understanding that it's everywhere.
Right.
All powerful and conscious of everything, right?
Right.
And I remember as time went on and I was starting to get older, going to different penitentiaries and stuff like that, there were spurts where I would be able to pray like really, really deeply, right? And during the course of those prayers, I would go more within myself instead of just saying the prayer outside of myself and just, but I was trying to always feel something, right? And eventually, through prayer, through my meditations and stuff like that, I was able to search deep within myself and feel, the presence of like that of the spirit, right? And then I started to recognize like, that life meant more than just me being here physically. So when I turned like 28, I had called on my dad, right? And when I called on my dad, I had an experience, right? And then, not by chance or coincidence, my sister sent me my dad's thesis. So when I started to read my dad's thesis and started to understand that obligations is what others put on you, but duty is what you put on yourself, that's the words of my father, I started to realize that I had a duty to uplift instead of always bringing things down. And the circumstances that was upon my life, even though I didn't choose certain things in regards to my life shifting, losing my parents and stuff like that, it was my responsibility to address that, right?
Right.
My ability to respond to the life that was upon me.
Right.
Right. So I started to do more reading. I started to do more praying, and I just shifted the paradigm. Thank God.
Thank God. So let me ask you this, and after you ask it, I'm gonna tell you why I asked you this. What are the different places where you was housed at throughout your incarceration? Because I think it's important that people kind of get an idea of what this stuff is really like.
Right. So from DC jail, when I think it was 2000, I left from DC jail and went to Lawton maybe like when I was 18, because I had got found guilty, but it was back and forth to Lawton to the DC jail because I was still fighting the cases or whatever. So then from Lawton, they came one night and they was like, Momolu, pack your stuff, and guys that had been in Lawton for a while, they told me, they was like, yeah, you about to go on a load. So I didn't even really understand what the load was.
Right.
So when the officer came, he was like, I was like, where I'm going? He said, you going to New Mexico, right? So
New Mexico?
New Mexico.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
So when, you know, they shackled us up and had belly chains, and then they put a long chain. You had to be connected to another, you know, prisoner, right? So, you know, if we would try to run or anything, that, you know, we couldn't run fast because we got shackles and you cuffed to somebody else. So from there, I went to New Mexico, then I went to Arizona, and then I went to Leavenworth. You know, this is when we transitioned from the state prisons, which was New Mexico and Arizona, and then we started going to the feds, the federal system.
Those were CCA joints, right? When you was in
CCA.
New Mexico, when you was in Arizona.
Right.
And then once you left there, when you went to Leavenworth, this started your journey in the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
Exactly.
Keep going.
So then Leavenworth, then I left Leavenworth, and they sent me to Victorville, California. And then from Victorville, California, I went to Coleman, Florida. Then from Florida, I went to Pollock, Louisiana. Then from Pollock, Louisiana, I went to Lee County, right? Lee County in West Virginia. But throughout the courses of moving to them different penitentiaries,
right,
you know, they might have me in Oklahoma for a minute, right? They might have me in Colorado for a minute. What other spots? You know, Atlanta, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, they had me in these different spots, and in most of these spots being as though I was what they call a maximum security prisoner, right? In those spots, I would be on lockdown, right? And then in certain spots, while I was still young, you know, I might be in a hole for 3 years straight, right? And, you know, things like that. So, you know, for certain infractions that I may have caught, or certain investigations that, you know, these officers was, you know, saying that I was doing this or doing that, and they didn't have any proof of it. But however, they would lock me down and hold me in there until they felt justified to let me out.
And the reason why I asked you that, I wanted you to be able to share that, because I want to put a caveat out there to say that I'm not telling these stories or the details of certain stories to garnish any type of like sympathy or to absolve us from things that we may have done as children, right? I'm asking these questions so that the answers, the people can see them and they can have a bit more understanding that in spite of misdeeds that we may have committed against society, that even though we were able to get out, we still served life sentences. You were 16, I was 17. Both of us came home when we were damn near 40 years old. So even though we received the mercy through legislation, the IRAA legislation, which we are attempting to save by using these stories, like we've been through it. You know what I mean? And we paid our debt to society, and we played it forward. Not only are we playing it forward, but we've come out here, which we're going to get into in a little bit, for you to just talk about a lot of the great things that you have done since you've been free. Now, we know that, and as you can hear the brother's story, that, again, I got to emphasize this on every interview, that the brain science was right. Children can grow out of crime if they're removed from the environments that they was in, that perpetuated that particular mentality, and their brain gets the opportunity to develop. The science shows that the brain develops fully around the age 25, 26, etc. You heard Momolu say he was about 28, and then from that point moving forward, he had a whole paradigm shift. His whole narrative, perspective, and outlook on life had changed. And I just wanted to point out all the different places that he's been in, and that's not unique. Most of the people that you hear on these interviews, they've been in multiple places all throughout the United States. So it's not that we're trying to absolve anyone of anything. We're just trying to create clarity, one, to show that, okay, even though we didn't have to die in prison and we made it out, we still did life sentences. So we still had the accountability of what it was that we've done. We still served a substantial amount of time, but during that time, we were able to redeem ourselves and resurrect ourselves to the point that we can now come back out here and be upstanding members of society. So now what I want to get into with you is post-release, the things you've done since you've been home. How long you been home now?
October 7th will make 6 years.
6 years. And just talk to the people, man, about, because I know you've done a lot of stuff since you've been home. You've had impact in a lot of different spaces. You've worked with different organizations. You've worked on your own through your own nonprofit and having impact with the young people in the communities. I want you to speak to that, man. Put words to that and let the people know, because I want them to know that what the legislators did in passing IRAA the second look, what the Supreme Court said about the brain science, that all of this stuff is right. Because everybody that I'm interviewing is a testament to the fact that all of that stuff was right. So talk to the people about your journey since you've been home and some of the things that you've done since you've been home.
So I would say the greatest thing that I've done since I've been home was to just consistently put my greatest effort towards saving the young men and women that come from these redlining communities in which I was raised, right? I understand that a lot of these young people be geniuses, right? Mm-hmm. But they are not in a space where they can be able to like show their genius. Mm-hmm. The greatest gift that we have as a people is our potential, right? That's the greatest gift that God has given us, right? And our greatest gift back to God is the development of that potential, right? So that's what I give the youth, mm-hmm. you know, not only in society, those that are incarcerated as well. Mm-hmm. And we always say that the best example or the best form, right? The best example, the best form of the example is not, you know, leadership. That's the only leadership, is to be the example. So a lot of times, like through my life, right? Mm-hmm. Like when I'm going through different things, right? The younger people, they watch me and they see that, you know, I'm not deterred by if I'm having a bad situation, whether it be finances or whatever the case may be. I'm not going to go and rob or kill anybody in order to make any type of money, right? Mm-hmm. The greatest thing that we have is our character. So I'm uplifting the community by how I'm living my life, by being an example, showing them that leadership is three ways. A best leader, he sees before, right? He knows more and he sees further, right? So I'm being an example by going into these communities, showing them, you know, being transparent, telling them, you know, what it is to be able to have faith, because faith without works is dead. Right. So we have to pray as if everything depends on God, but we have to work as if everything depends on us, right? So every day of my life, right, I'm just being that example, whether it be a phone call, one of them call me, right? Or whether I got to pull up into the community, right? And give them that type of wisdom. I done did art programs, right? In the neighborhood. Some of these programs been funded by me, and I haven't even had, you know, the totality of the funds to get it done, but some way and somehow the Creator always blesses me to make sure that it get done. And I think that, you know, last but not least, you know, without the power, you know what I'm saying, of my Creator and my ancestors that walk with me, you know, none of this would have ever been possible, right? So I stay prayed up and I stay making it, you know, getting it done, you know, and giving the people hope, right? Yeah.
Man, you know, I just think that this has been a beautiful interview. And like you said, things have to be in alignment. You know what I mean? Sometimes you think things ain't gonna work one way and then they end up working. You know what I mean? But like you said, things have to be in alignment. And I think that is very, very important that we continue to push these stories out there, continue to push our narrative out there and creating our narrative, and not letting other people create our narrative, not letting other people use our stories, use our struggles, use our pain, and with a pure intent of nothing more than to preserve what we have been blessed with through IRAA and the Second Look Amendment Act. Because essentially this is what these stories is all about, providing testaments, testimony, affirmations behind what has been done and what we are doing. Like, again, you know, my brother in his last interview, Halim, he talked about 7 times out of 10, people recidivate. They come out of prison, they'll do something, they'll go back to prison. But what we have learned with this particular population, and what makes this particular population unique, because the vast majority of us went to prison at the ages of 16 and 17 years old, right? With children. And then even with those from 18 to 24, you still got the same development or underdeveloped brain, you know what I mean? According to the science. It's not my words, it's the science, right? And so with this particular population, and people or the legislators deeming it that if the evidence shows that we warranted a second chance to get it right, I've been witness that for the vast majority of us, maybe 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 came home and got it right. And when I say got it right, not to say that they got their life all worked out and stuff like that, but they had enough resolve in recognizing the blessing and the mercy that was bestowed upon them that they were able to come home, even in spite of their struggles, still chose not to deviate. So much so that they would have to take the risk of possibly losing their life or going back to prison. So with that being said, you're dealing with a different aspect of the population, because of the regular recidivism rate is 7 out of 10, but for those who came home on IRAA, it's more like 1 out of 10. Then we know that everything that we standing on is accurate, is right, and the people need to have a consciousness about this. So what we're going to try to do as we continue to develop these stories, we're going to try to plug in with some of these Republican congressmen, because these are the ones. Trump has the House, he has the Senate, and so if they want to move this stuff through, they can move it through, and then all this legislation to be repealed, and those who are still confined that have hope that they will possibly be able to get out through showing their rehabilitation under the IRAA, the Second Look Amendment Act, that stuff will be null and void. You know what I mean? So we fighting for them to continue to preserve this with the expectations that they can get a second chance at life and, fix or do better in those areas where they once did wrong or deviated or committed crimes against society, to be able to play it forward and give it back. So anything that you want to say in conclusion before we tap out on this interview, bro?
Yeah, so the only thing I want to say is, the people must remember, right, that a tree that's chopped down can grow back from the smell of water because of the hope, right? With that being said, I just want to leave with this, right? A few nights ago, I had read a story. I think it was in Acts, right? And it was speaking about the Apostle Paul. He was on the ocean, and they had a shipwreck. So once the survivors made it, everybody made it back to the land. They had took some wood and they started burning the wood. And then as they was doing that, a venomous snake, bit Paul. So when the snake bit Paul, everybody was looking at Paul because they was expecting him to swell up and die, right? But in Paul's mind, he had already known he'd been through worse, and he was able to champion that, right? And it was by the blessings of God that he moved straight through it. So just like everything else that we've been through, we gonna get through this, you know what I mean? But y'all gotta have faith. Y'all gotta be praying. We all gotta have faith. I think that we don't recognize our power all the time, you know what I mean? So once we really recognize our power, man, and then we use certain things, to facilitate and to empower us more, right? Such as our prayers and our meditation and our work, right? Then we gonna be able to get through anything. You know what I mean? There's nothing bigger than God, man. So with that, salute.
Yeah, and basically, man, y'all know that the platform is Greatness Unlimited 7. That's the Instagram, and then the YouTube page is at Greatness Unlimited 7. That's the number 7. Brother, give them your whatever, so that they can reach out to you.
So my page, my YouTube is Momolu, Momolu 33, and my page is basically my name, Momolu SK Stewart, right? And yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, man. We trying to bring this stuff together, man. So like anybody that feel like it's something that they can contribute to what it is that we're endeavoring to do, we definitely welcome you all. Our main thing is to try to get all these stories out, as many as we can, as fast as we can, and to try to effectuate, some type of defense. Because right now, they job putting us in a situation where we'll be bereft of any defense. So we're trying to do this in defense of preserving the Second Look Amendment Act and IRA. We need all the support that we can get. If you want to share your story, you came home with an IRA or the Second Look, reach out to me. If I haven't already reached out to you, you can catch me on DM me at my Greatness Unlimited number 7 page. Man, listen, y'all stay prayed up, stay focused, be smart, and pay attention to what's going on. Because if you don't do nothing, we ain't going to get nothing. That's the situation that we in, and it's real. And they're moving in an expedition fashion on their side. So we got to be even faster. But we got to be intentional. We got to be serious. We got to stick together. And we got to move out. Peace.